Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Sorry for the slight delay. I'm having an interesting conversation with today's guest already, and couldn't stop the conversation midway through to get going. And but here we are. We're now live streaming to you, and we'll have this interesting conversation on air with you. At any rate, welcome to today's show. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson. He, they pronouns. Executive producer, Light Thief Productions. Um, we've got a bunch of interesting topics to talk about today. And we're joined by Rick Lewis, the insightful writer behind Coloring Book, a play that delves deep into race, history, and mental health. Let's get Rick on screen because he's been here before, so he knows how it goes. And so I don't have to do a bunch of explanation. Rick, please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Rick Lewis, pronouns are I am, he, him. Um, I am a theater professional, an artist activist, and a local Burlington County politician.
Local Burlington County politician. For interest, for the interest of those watching, we often have political discussions because I think you and I are close on the political spectrum, though in Europe we'd probably be members of different parties. um,
Wouldn't
uh,
that be great?
yeah, right? I mean,
Wouldn't that be
like,
wonderful?
you and I have like really interesting conversations off outside of this show too about politics, and I think that they're valuable conversations. And I always learn something from you. I hope I can provide some enlightenment to
Absolutely.
your thought processes. Um, but yeah, we were talking about the upcoming election. How do you want to do today? Do you want to talk a little bit about Coloring Book and then split off from there, or do you want to just continue the conversation we started off screen?
Let's continue where we were because I
Okay.
can talk about coloring book at any time because that's all in my head and I got that down. So let's continue the thread we're on.
All right. So we were talking a little bit about politics, modern politics. I'm considering swearing off the internet, right? Like swearing off arguing on the internet because it gets me very little place. It eats up a lot of my time and it frustrates me. Why should I constantly be frustrated by something in my life? But you know, you and I both opine on the internet, as you put it. It is something that we just do. Um, to bring people into the conversation, where do you see the most problem where people are opining and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere?
Um, th- the lane that's most frustrating for me in that whole thing, um, are people who are stating information, posting, blah, 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 predominantly to make themselves feel good or feel activated or feel involved. Like one of the things we were talking about is like people who like to post things insulting Trump supporters
Hmm.
or people who like to, post the sort of gotcha zingers about Trump. And it's like, okay, he's garbage. We know this. We've known this for a long time. So it's kind of like, what's the point? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish? And I had a conversation with a person last week who finally admitted that like it just makes him feel good to insult other people.
I mean, okay, so yeah, and I was talking about, like there's the people that, like that's their whole point, like, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of people that the whole point of posting anything controversial, it doesn't really matter what the controversy is against or about, is just the attention that they're seeking for, you know, hey, I'm gonna post this gotcha, or I get a little adrenaline rush from arguing with people. Um, but they're like we were talking about, like, the effectiveness of this as a strategy to convince people of something. And you were saying how there are people that honestly do this thinking that they can change the mind of a Trump supporter. Um, and you pointed out that that this is the candidate that people have chosen for 3 election cycles now. That the Republican Party has chosen for 3 election cycles now. And my question becomes, you said, and the what started this line of thought for me was, you said this is the person that they've chosen, which in my mind, all of a sudden I was like, did they actually choose him, or is this marketing? Um, Go ahead.
I have a firm belief. Okay, so going back to 2016, a populist candidate was going to win.
No, sure, yeah,
Um, in despite where his politics wound up, Obama was elected as a populist candidate.
absolutely.
Um, and then we found out what we were really dealing with, but still. So in order to kind of get the reins um in the both the Republicans and the Democrats tried really hard to reestablish or to reinstall sort of establishment business as usual candidates.
Right.
Um, the GOP sold what was left of their souls and embraced Donald
Right, but
because
he wasn't the candidate that they originally wanted to go with.
oh, not at all. He wasn't the candidate that the establishment originally wanted to
Right.
go with. But like I said, a populist candidate was going to win.
Right. And
And
that's where the GOP, like, pivoted and said, "We see who's going to win to maintain power. Here's who we have to run."
correct. And then in so so the establishment, the mechanics, your McConnells, your Chuck Grassley's, all of those folks said, here are the things that we want to do. This is the guy that's going to give us the power and the place and the majority to do it.
Right. And he's not going to be afraid to sign off on whatever bullshit
He's
we
going to
give
sign
him.
off on
Right.
whatever we run up the flagpole.
Right.
Because
Because he's not a
yeah,
politician, he's a face.
right, right. So, and that's why I said earlier, it's like it's who they want for differing reasons. Like the reason that McConnell wanted to install him is very different than the reason that the God bless Donald Trump MAGA hat wearing buy a Trump Bible person wants him. Like and I hesitate to compare people to Nazis, but sometimes it's just really accurate. And what I mean is by this, there were opportunistic Nazis
Sure.
who saw the way the wind was blowing and saw how it could be beneficial to them.
Right.
There were social.
Just to clarify this, there were folks in that joined the Nazi Party because they were disillusioned business people who had lost money and time to what they could easily classify, or most easily group into a classification of liberal-ish, progressive-ish social movers and shakers who were creating a better economy, um, but that was losing them their traditional ways of making money.
Right, right. And there were also people who were like true idealistic believers
Right. There were a lot
in the
of
whole.
people who also, like, and this was this was I know I'm not going to shock a lot of you, but I might shock some of you. The idealism of white supremacy wasn't started in Nazi Germany. It was adopted from the United States of America.
We started that shit,
We
right?
started that shit and we sold it to Europe as an easy way to organize and control people.
I tell people all the time, Parchment came before Prushoff. And they're like, what does that mean? So Prushoff is the camp, we're getting totally offline, but Prushoff was the camp featured in Schindler's List.
Right.
Well, decades before that, we had Parchman Farm in Mississippi. Like, we sold them how to do prison labor camps. Anyway, my point being, so Donald is more like the opportunistic type.
Absolutely. No, I mean,
Mike Pence, for
if you
instance,
look back at things Donald Trump has said and done in his life, he believes none of his own bullshit. He believes
right,
absolutely not. He doesn't care what the bullshit is that he's hawking, so long as at the end of the day, he can claim to have more money.
right, right. And then, and like I was saying, so like Mike Pence is a true believer sort. Like he believes in God and God bless America and all that blah blah blah. So the GOP, for whatever reason, and I'm talking across the board, has sort of bought this lane and they're in this lane. And so yeah, so I think trying to convince them by insulting them or the usual political rhetoric of, you know, women should have control over their bodies, which is absolutely all of the things that are absolutely true and that make absolute sense, aren't going to sway anyone on that side of the aisle at this point, because everyone on that side of the aisle pretty much, I mean, and let me say, so there are absolutely never Trumper Republicans. There
Sure.
are absolutely people who have sort of divorced themselves from what the GOP is now.
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't the people that you're going to insult by, putting up video clips of like people standing in line to buy Trump Bibles, or like insulting Melania because Trump is now on trial for hush money. So, so I find myself going, other than making yourself feel good, other than making yourself feel morally superior, what's the point of these rants that you go on? Um, on the flip side, whenever I see somebody post about the successes of Bidenomics, I want to choke them. Um, and somebody posted a great thing. I saw it last week for the first time. They were like, the greatest economic indicator is how the bottom 30% is doing in the supermarket, not how the 1% is doing in the stock market.
Right.
And it's like people talk about, Bidenomics and GDP and more jobs added, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, but there's 4 million more people in poverty than there were 4 years ago.
And I mean, to be fair, this is something that Republicans have always done well as well, but both parties do very well in the party machinery is pick the set of stats that you want to say makes things look better or worse. Um,
Here,
and they both do it all the time.
right, but here's the problem that I have. So a big part of the difficulty for this election, and I'm predicting that this is going to be one of the lowest turnouts in the last 50 years. I'm planting that flag right now. Um, a big part of the problem is the things that are being said to make Biden look good don't hit most Americans where it counts. And if you keep telling people
Well, I mean,
how
this is the classic Democrat problem of being too damn smart. Like the things that they're saying that to try and make Biden look like the best candidate, for smart people they make sense. For people who are, nerdily involved in the economy or in like, macroeconomics or even in like world global geopolitics, they all make sense. It all makes sense, when you look at it from a step back, like hoity perspective. And that's exactly what the Republicans have been campaigning against for the last since Reagan, since before Reagan, really. But Reagan definitely sold it. You know, we're good old cowpoke. We like the Republican mantra is you don't have to be smart to be good.
Yeah, the problem is that so there's no on paper, there's no reason that Biden and Trump should be neck and neck
No,
as far as polling goes on paper, except the reality, and I think it's a reality that lots of people on the left ignore, is that like GDP is great, stock market is great to an extent, whatever, blah 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 blah. Um, Buying a gallon of milk for $4.50 matters a lot more to most voters than what the stock market is doing.
sure.
And not seeing, you know, uh, we we can, but we don't even need to get into how many people are refusing at this point to vote for Biden because of Gaza. Like
Right,
there are hundreds of thousands of people who are saying, I'm not going to vote for Genocide Joe.
right.
And that's a problem. And when you have like Michigan, where they have the primary, and enough people for Biden to lose the state decide to vote uncommitted,
Hmm.
it's like the things that are mattering, the things that really matter to the people that you need to form your coalition to actually win, which is the same thing that Hillary blew. The people that you need are the people that you're pissing off and not listening to.
This I think, this I think is related to our local segment on the 10th district and on the what you call it, the policy of the new mayor,
Mhm.
the Parker administration's announcement of the 5 phase Kensington plan. I think this is all related in that,
Nice pivot.
huh? Let's
Nice pivot.
let's pivot. In that you have a lot of people, regardless of what their party is, who myopically look at their own circumstance, um, and this is, I think, where the GOP always wins out in the general planning and selling of their product versus the Democratic Party being not good at figuring this out. So, in the 10th district, you have several candidates for this is the PA State House race. You have several candidates for 10th district, and I'm trying to find them real quick because somebody texted me about this race a few weeks ago, and I think it was Timothy. Um, you have Saja Blackwell. You have, ooh, I lost it. Um, Amon Brown, and you have Cass Green. And Timothy recommended I have them all on the show. I'm willing to have anybody on the show, to be quite frank. So if any of those candidates wants to come on the show, I'm more than happy to have them on and have a conversation. However, somebody posted in my timeline, Saja Blackwell's during a campaign event, stated that the reason that West Philadelphia has a lot of black kids shooting each other is drill music. I,
Hmm.
I what? I mean, okay, Saja Blackwell. Saja Blackwell, first of all, I assume is related to the dynastic Blackwell family.
Lucian,
Um,
yeah.
I can only assume that because of her name and her location in West Philadelphia. I don't have any birth records or anything like that. But the Blackwell family has been very involved in Philadelphia politics. I think since the founding of the country. um,
Yeah, as long as yeah,
but most recently well renowned for having Councilmember Jamie Blackwell and kind of really stranglehold on the RCOs and other things in West Philadelphia. And kind of being the family that controls slash decides the direction of West Philadelphia. There were some controversies and illegal things happening and prosecutions, and that all played itself out. And so the Blackwell family is trying to recover from that. And this is one of the first forays back into attempting to have Blackwell leadership in West Philadelphia. Um, if you look at Saja Blackwell's policies page on her campaign website, I mean, it doesn't say anything. I mean, forgive me if you think I'm wrong, Rick. I'll post the link to you if you want to take a look at the
yeah.
policies.
Let me eyeball that.
But yeah, so in my opinion, this doesn't say anything. It talks about gun violence, it talks about financial literacy, it talks about affordable housing, mental health, food insecurity. Great. Yeah, those are all great things to talk about. There are no plans here. There's no actual way. I mean, the gun violence. She talks about common sense gun control. I mean, we've been talking about common sense gun control in Pennsylvania for good grief since Reagan. Um, Common sense
Right,
gun control was coined by the Republicans as a way to as a way to sell gun control measures that would take guns out of the hands of black people and
right.
let white people keep their guns. That's really what common sense gun control meant when it was first sold. I mean, a lot of other people have picked up the term because it is a good term. Common sense gun control would be things like providing need for insurance or licensing to get guns or to keep guns or to operate guns, training to operate guns. There are common sense gun control measures that wouldn't be racist. But the majority of common sense gun control proposals um, from the early 80s till the late 90s were just a way for Democrats to sign on to gun control laws without looking like they were anti-black. Um, Community policing and accountability. I hate to tell you, we have community policing and we have tried accountability with the PPD over and over and over and over and over again. We've tried it so many times that I personally was wondering what the heck is wrong with this? Why isn't this working? And I looked into it, and the reason why it's not working is because we have a really strong contract handed down by the state for Philadelphia Police Department union that can literally get away with anything. They can do anything. They can do anything they want at all, and the city still has to pay them, and it still has to pay them what they want to be paid, because the contract arbitration clauses in the state law don't do anything to create an actual arbitration situation. They create a situation in which the local the
The
police
FOP.
the FOP gets what it wants, and it gets what it wants every single year.
And now they have a mayor who is particularly supportive of them.
Right. Now
We
you
may
have
or
a
may not
mayor
get in-
instead of
we may or may not get into that.
we have a mayor that instead of providing any pushback for that, um, entirely every time this has come up in her career supported whatever the police want as far as more money, more people, more money,
More gear,
more
right?
money.
More
Well,
military,
that's what I mean
right?
when I say more money.
Right.
Training is money, gear is money. Uh, More training is
Uh,
more money.
Settlements is more money.
Settlements is money.
Yep.
Anyway, investing in
Um,
youth and community programs. I hate to tell you, we do that already. Like, you have no, there's no avenue to spend more money in the city on youth and community programs. The structures don't exist to be able to spend any more money. We're pumping as much money into that sector as possible. The place where the structures do exist that could affect youth and community, which is the arts, people like Saja and people like Parker have totally sold out and said, "Yeah, we don't believe in that."
so here's a question. As you sort of read through the page, um, do you really think that anything about this campaign page is sincere? Because like here's my thing. So there's Philly politics. And there's the way Philly politics work, and there's the way Philly politics are sold.
Right.
And so people who so name name is first.
Right.
Blackwell's, Clark's, Streets,
Streets.
um, what's his name? Not Evans. There's up in Mount Airy, Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
Johnson, Kenyatta.
Johnson.
Um,
Yeah.
right. Like there's names that are the most powerful selling point.
Right.
Then there's your connection to like ward leaders in actual neighborhoods.
The church
Uh,
ladies.
right. And then so on your website you kind of have to have those sort of vague, empty bullet point cliches. And that's what gets you, like, those are the things that get you elected. So she's kind of got all of those bases covered, regardless of what actual policy she may or may not try to implement. And as you pointed out, like, if you look at all of those things have either been suggested, attempted, or shot down and really just kind of exist as like nice little talking points. Um, so I'm not surprised at all by the emptiness or the vulgarity of what's on the page, but she's probably going to win anyway because of all of the other things that you need to win in Philly politics.
Why?
And
And okay. So let's go back to the point I was trying to originally make, which is why, if you look at this on a national level, um, why is the politicking the same? Why do we have candidates that make empty promises or promises of stuff that isn't going to work that we've either tried or are currently implementing, and that just doesn't work, um, and then you don't have any of the, like, as soon as somebody comes up with a new idea or proposes something that science says will work, or that study says will work, they get shot down. Like, like the defund the police went from, in like the space of 6 months, went from a slogan, a slogan that everybody could get behind, to like you could get thrown out of the Democratic Party for saying it.
Because and I say this with hurt in my heart, honestly. Um, at the end of the day, the DNC doesn't give a shit. Um, because like you're right, because we go from George Floyd protests and painting Black Lives Matter in DC and defund the police to Nancy Pelosi dealing in kente cloth and Biden giving law enforcement $450 million to buy shit.
Right.
Um, the DNC doesn't care about combating white male Protestant supremacy. They're just banking on us voting against it.
Right,
And it's
but here's that's the thing that the Obama campaign capitalized on was it looked for a moment like, oh, hey, we're actually going to combat white male supremacy.
right. It looked like it.
Right. No, and
And that
I know we didn't, but
right. But that's but and so what they're hoping, like, and I talk to people about this a lot. Like when you look at Hillary with super predators and how private prisons supported her campaigns and all of those sorts of things. And then the way she dealt with it when people asked her to defend her record. Um, when you look at, it makes me chuckle when people talk about Clarence Thomas and they bitch about Clarence Thomas, but they somehow leave Joe Biden out of that conversation. I'm like, how did we get Clarence Thomas?
Joe
When
Biden,
you
we
right
got
when you look at people talking about the criminal justice system, but somehow they forget the author of the '94 crime bill.
right.
Um, and so as people talk about, we have to, we have to fight for women's choice. I'm like, okay, well, where was in 2009 when Obama and Biden decided that it was more important to placate the right than to codify Roe? They literally said that codifying Roe wasn't a priority.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
and then
and just to clarify for those that don't follow politics as closely as you and I do, and this isn't even really following politics closely, but there is a vast majority of people out in the world who don't even follow politics closely enough to understand what you mean by in 2009 when we could have codified Roe.
okay, so there was a push to codify Roe because the writing was on the wall as to what um, the right wanted to do.
Yeah, and
And the
absolutely, we've seen this coming. People who are in politics, especially people who are elected and in campaigning, have seen this coming for 2 decades now.
at
Yeah,
least, um, and the it was a very convenient talking point for the right to get evangelical and religious voters on board. Like it's a very, very easy point, and it's very sort of hard to. And I don't want this to come out as insultingly as it's going to sound. It's hard to argue that rationally from a religious standpoint. Like it's hard to say, well, okay, you believe what you believe about God and when conception starts and all that, but let's write a different law because that's not the way evangelical thought typically works.
right.
Anyway, so in 2009, it came up that Roe should be codified and signed into law because of what we saw coming down the pike.
Also, because we had a majority in both houses of Congress and the presidency,
Right, right. Um,
and we had
and
a Supreme Court that
that was
had
amenable.
that would support any challenges to that new law, and basically rubber stamp Roe as a law into actual legal standing and support Roe v. Wade. And you had an aging Supreme Court member who was kind of the last bastion of women's rights on the Supreme Court, who nobody knew at the time how long she was going to stay on the Supreme Court, if she was going to retire or if she was going to die, which she did.
She died, right? Um, despite being asked to retire, but that's a whole other story. We shan't speak ill of the dead.
No.
But so that was the opportunity. That was the most solid opportunity for Roe to be codified into law. And the Obama Biden administration decided and said publicly that it's not a priority right now, and that it's more important for us to focus on things that we have in common with our adversaries across the aisle.
Which is
So,
dumb.
right, because the adversaries across the aisle were like, great, because our plan is to take Roe v. Wade and to make it not.
Right.
And so it wasn't like it was a surprise. So it was, and that's part of the problem that I have with moderates and incrementalism in general. For the last, since Clinton, really, for the last 35, 40 years, we've been trying to get moderate white Republicans to like us. In the meantime, the right has had a very clear agenda and has been doing what they can up and down the ballot, from the presidency to Congress to state legislatures to school boards.
Yes, I was going to say school boards.
Right, up and down the ballot, they've been tirelessly, blatantly working towards their agenda. And the top of Democratic leadership is much more interested in pleasing donors, getting donor money, maintaining power over what is the larger voting bloc. Like Democrats outnumber Republicans now like 3-1. And so it's much more about maintaining the power and maintaining the structure than it is about actually doing anything to combat this very clear, very ongoing agenda.
And it's
And
very
part of
focused. Like let's not be coy here.
right,
They have meetings, they have conferences, they have planning sessions, they have whole think tanks that are focused on a very specific, very narrow focused agenda that deals with issues one at a time, not holistically. There is a holistic plan, but that's not what the rank
it's
and
not how the
file
entire
deal
point,
with it.
right?
And the holistic plan isn't even really mysterious. The holistic plan is, hey, it was really fun when white men were in charge. Let's go back there.
Exactly.
Um, like
That
that.
that that's it.
Yeah, that's the big picture. I mean, it's not a mystery. It's not confusing. It's not something hidden. There's no like, oh, like it's not make America great again. It's make America white and male led again. That's the whole
And
point.
Christian and Christian. That's
And
very
Christian.
important.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
and Christian's kind of wobbly.
yeah, no, that's why it's white and male, because like Christian is just, like the I spent a lot of time in my youth as learning Christianity, studying Christianity. I studied
Mhm.
Judaism and Islam a little bit too, but I spent more time with Christianity than most anything. The dogma, the whole idea, the whole encompassing thought of Christianity, and some practicing Christians nowadays, they are not what we're talking about.
Correct.
They're
Like,
not the average practicing Christian is being led around just as much as the average voter. Like, you have a bunch of people who have a goal, and is not compatible with the written goals of the organization, but it is easily sold by some of the elements of the written goals of the organization.
you're a little bit nicer than I am. Um, in that, um, there is an extra element of difficulty to crack through when people think that they are doing things for the creator of the universe. So when people think that they're doing things for God or in godly ways or because this is what God wants, um, that's another guy. You have some people who might be racist. You have some people who might be sort of that suburban economic benign, buy into white male Protestant supremacy. And then again, you have people who are, so that's a couple of layers. But then when you also throw God on top of that, God bless America, America, God shed his grace on thee, blah, 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 all of those sort of culturally ingrained things. Um, that's a whole other area to crack through than when you don't have to deal with that element.
And let's talk about some true believers. So, I want to bring up Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I'm not going to code it. I'm just going to go right into it. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are true believers in the white male supremacy. Um,
Yeah,
for Donald Trump, it's specifically because he was raised to understand that white men were in power and that they should stay there. For Elon Musk, I think it has more to do with his general upbringing and understanding in apartheid South Africa that there are people who are better than other people. I think that is a psychological understanding that he has from his upbringing, from his environment, and that you're not going to break that. Um,
correct. I
he
agree.
he has in fact said publicly that there are people that are better than other people, and though he hasn't, he's smart enough to not have created a gaffe of like specifically saying that black people are stupid. He has touched on the edges of it with things like, well, on average, well, the
Right.
DEI is killing everything. Well, I don't want any black people in the black women in the leadership of my companies. Well, I'm going to demote this manager in one of my companies because, you know, and this is where the white incrementalists get their jollies is because he didn't demote that black guy because he was black. He demoted that black guy because he made a mistake. No, he didn't demote that black guy because he made a mistake. He was looking for a mistake to demote that black guy.
To both the black guy.
Right.
Correct.
Um, so anyway, the reason why I wanted to transition to this is because Elon Musk is really popular amongst white incrementalists, amongst even amongst just general people who don't really pay attention to the things that company founders are saying in detail because they don't have to. And I don't deny them the right to live that way. That's perfectly fine. You can go along and live your life without really paying
Right.
attention to what's going on around you. That's fine.
Sometimes I'm jealous of them.
Seriously, like I must have wasted so many thousands of calories thinking about this shit. But Pink News, Mother Jones, Forward have all written articles about the kind of questionable things Elon Musk sometimes says and the dog whistles that he lets out. Um, and I wonder how long it's going to take for the like overall general public to catch on. Yeah, Elon Musk is famous for being, like this hotshot kid who, thumbs his nose um, at history, at like existing things, at you know, he's smarter than everybody who's come before him. Why shouldn't he start from square one? He's also, I think, perhaps famous for, being a big supporter of marijuana use. He very frequently tweets things, makes things release on, causes, talks about, and creates policies around April 20th, or 420 the time, or 420 in any other way. What a lot of people don't realize is that in white Christo-fascism nationalism, there is a recent resurgence of 420 as a reference to Adolf Hitler. And it might surprise you, but Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th. So it
That
is
does surprise me.
Adolf Hitler's birthday. And apparently, this has existed in South Africa and a lot of European countries for a lot longer. The use of 420 as a coded dog whistle into white nationalism. Um, so yeah, so along with all of his other tweets, like brazenly using 88, brazenly
Hmm.
supporting tweets by white nationalists, um, uh, using the phrase kek, K-E-K, um, uh, use the term kek originated in gaming world, was absorbed into far right culture according to the SPLC, and users on 4chan discovered that an ancient Egyptian deity called Kek could appear as a man with a frog head, something saw parallel with the use of Pepe the Frog as a symbol.
Hmm.
Um, and people have created a white nationalist symbol flag for the fictional country of Kekistan, where political correctness is supposedly decried. Anyway, um, his whole drive against pronouns, policies he's instituted at his companies. I'm just gonna say it. Elon Musk is a true believer in white nationalism, white supremacy. It's not. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't act like it doesn't. It isn't his thing. He just uses dog whistles better than most people, and he doesn't commit the accidental uh, you know gaffes that a lot of public speakers do, which is funny because he's a really bad public speaker, but he doesn't he
He also
has
doesn't do a lot of it
he doesn't do a
compared.
lot of it. That's true. Well, he does a lot of tweeting. Um,
True, true, and you got to think that at least some of his tweets pass through a reviewer, or at least I think so, because I think that's why a lot of what a lot of what you would think he would say doesn't actually get out there. But like you start off asking, when are people going to catch on? My thing is, when did people catch on that Henry Ford was, you know, a Nazi sympathizer?
right. And
And did it matter once they did?
right.
Same thing with like Joe Kennedy.
I
Like, but did it matter once they
I
did?
want to know when people are going to catch on that Ford was a Nazi sympathizer and that the Zionist movement was originally designed to get Jews into a giant ghetto. But I,
Right. But it, and again, the question is, all right, even if they did realize it, would it matter at this point?
it should matter.
It should, but again, like look at it, like what, and this goes back to what we are talking about, talking to people on the internet. Um, Nothing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is going to make a Donald Trump supporter not like Donald Trump.
Sure.
Um, Nothing that comes out of Joe Rogan's mouth is going to make a Joe Rogan supporter go, "Ooh, I don't know about
I don't
this
know.
guy."
There's some small percentages that are influenced by these things.
I don't I don't
I think you're talking about law of averages.
I think, but see, I think it's a little more nuanced than that, because at this point, like there was a point in time where, like before the internet and before social media existed, where people were kind of given the information that they got. And if you really wanted to know more about what was going on with a certain thing, you really kind of had to dig. But there were just a few very specific schools of thought, and most people kind of lived in them. And then as social media became more and more of a thing, then people could kind of go around and dig up their own information or misinformation, blah, 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 blah. So people, for the most part, kind of get in their lanes, and they, for the most part, kind of live there. And so you have people who like information and like understanding and like history and like being correct, who will continue to seek out information, continue to learn, and then their opinions will be adjusted somewhat by what they learn, because that's who they are.
Mm,
And so it's like, okay, well, I thought this was true. I find out it's not true. I'm most interested in knowing what's true.
mm-hmm.
So I'm going to adjust the way I think.
Right.
But then you've got a lot of other people, most other people, who aren't that flexible and who aren't that secure in their own being to be able to pivot off of what they build their foundations on. So I think,
I think that's a very interesting point. I think I grew up with the seeking of truth as kind of our family thing. Um, which is funny because the seeking of truth for most of my family involved becoming Jehovah's Witnesses, and then I studied with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was like, yeah, there's nothing about this that's true. Um,
right, right. But
um,
again, but even that ability to go, okay, this is what I'm being told is true, but I can examine it and go, I'm not digging this. This is not stacking up to the other critical thoughts that I have. Again, like that's a thing that most people won't do, even if they're capable of it. And so that's what I mean when I talk about like what's the point. Like when I argue with people online, my first purpose is um to push back against things that I think are incorrect. Um, like everybody's entitled to their opinion, and like people can have their opinions. Um, if their opinions are racist or transphobic or homophobic or misogynist or whatever, I'll push back against them, because I'm like, that's your opinion, and you put that opinion out in the world, and here's what I think about that opinion and why.
right.
So sometimes it's really a matter of being the counter to bullshit.
I had an argument with somebody, and this was in reference to something that was happening in the Frankfurt area. Um, and they said that what I was saying was just my opinion, and I was like, yeah, sure, it is just my opinion, and there are lots of opinions in the world. Um, what opinion do you have? Do you have the opinion that like I'm a mixed race person, therefore I shouldn't exist? Is that your opinion? There's people that have the opinion that black people are just stupid. Is that an opinion I should not that I should let people just have? Um, there's lots of opinions in the world. Some of them just aren't valid.
Our ass, right? So sometimes I will intentionally fight against those types of opinions. The other reason, though, is sometimes I argue for the unspoken people in the room,
Right.
people who are reading or seeing whatever's going on, who may not like. I don't mind sometimes doing emotional labor on behalf of other people. So there'll be some people who haven't done the digging into history and don't understand, you know, 2009 and how that equates to now or whatever. So I don't mind having the arguments in order to express to them, and so they can hear stuff that they wouldn't normally hear. Um, but
I want to just real quick before we delve too deep in this. I want to do two things in the next 10 minutes. I want to talk about two things in the next 10 minutes. I want to
okay,
talk about, and we're going to end the show a little bit late. It's going to be 10 minutes over, but I want to talk about two things before we get out of here. I want to talk about your show, but I also want to talk about something that people don't really pay attention to and think about, and the international or the national news story that it is. So we're in the middle of a battle right now over green energy, green thought, changes to regulations to make things more environmentally friendly. What a lot of people don't realize is that been having this battle for probably the entire industrial revolution, and the reason is because a lot of things that affect the environment are very hyper locally dirty, and even when not visible, the consequences of those things are visible. And so for instance, going back even before the Industrial Revolution, we've had tanning. Tanners were always put in the bad part of town. People who did tanning as a way of making their living had to have their businesses in the bad part of town because it's disgusting. It smells awful. It makes people sick. It makes people sick that aren't directly working with the tanning process. So they had to be in the bad part of town. Fast forward to now, we have whole huge communities that live in the shadow, the rain shadow, the wind shadow of things like refineries, things like processing plants, things like chemical manufacturers. And the EPA just created a new set of emissions rules that limit the release of several dozen chemicals that cause cancer. They show that they cause cancer, and they've, in any amount released into the air, will settle on whatever is downwind from them and will cause cancer in that population. Guess who's in all of those downwind areas?
brown people.
Yes, yes, they are. um, what happens is, a company wants to create a refinery. Well, they look at what surrounds the area where it would be easiest for them to create their refinery because of the infrastructure that's been put in place. And they go, okay, we really want this refinery right here. They work with government and local influential people to devalue and redline the area that will receive the most fallout from this, because they're the people with the least power to argue against it. So when their communities start having more cancer and more birth defects, more autism, more whatever, they can't argue it because they have no political power. So yeah, so how I'm tying all this into structural racism and redlining and local politics, because it is local politics. And we're having this battle on a national level as well, because even though the EPA is still creating these new rules, there was recently the release of a bank of of bills into the federal House that are designed to go directly against a lot of EPA rules and other environmental safety rules. Is one like the one that comes across the top of my head is hands off of our air conditioners. That's the
Mm,
title of a
mhm.
bill introduced in Congress. Um, uh, there's
Down
one.
ballot elections matter, folks.
Um, I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look these up, but there's just this whole, and they're trying to create like an astroturf grassroots effort to counter these bills with things like, telling people how, Biden's out to get your gas stove. I don't think anybody's gonna come into my house and take my gas stove, even though I like it. It might just become harder for me to get a gas stove, or I might have to pay more to get a gas
It
stove.
right. It won't even be that you can't get one. Um, the the unwillingness of and like I don't want to say both sides like it's equal because it's far more prevalent on the right, but we have enough folks who really don't want to go beyond the soundbite and really don't want so because they already believe and there's a guy that I communicate with. I met him on a film shoot and it was weird because we worked together for weeks. And then afterwards, I found out that he was like a tinfoil right wing MAGA nut job. And like I'm saying this honestly, um, who calls Biden every day the treasonous crackhead pedophile sleepy Joe. Like that's what he calls Biden. But like those folks already have their opinion of what like and when they think of like green new deal or green energy or whatever, they see an angry raving AOC and that's already what their mindset is. So to say that Biden's not going to let you have a hamburger because he's going to get rid of the cows, or AOC wants to make hamburgers go away and wants to make everybody vegan and eat fake meat, like it fits into the sort of raving mindset that they already have. um so it makes it more difficult to even have the rational conversation about what these things really mean and what the actual impacts, positive or negative, might be of this legislation that's going through, because in their heads they're already like green energy means I have to drive an electric car and I can't eat a hamburger, which is moronic, honestly, but it's much easier for them to latch onto that because they already have planted their flag, um, that green energy is negative, regardless of why they think that, or regardless of whatever other information they might get to the contrary.
The six bills were Stop Unaffordable Dishwasher Standards Act, Liberty and Laundry Act, the Affordable Air Conditioning Act, Clothes Dryer Reability Act, and the Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act, and the Refrigerator Freedom Act. I These bill names just they I don't
Meanwhile,
I
we
don't
still, don't have adequate access to healthcare in the country. Our poverty lines are increasingly growing. There's more homeless vets than there ever has been before. Um, but shit, let's protect those refrigerators.
And by the way, Purple Blackwell, this is the reason why there's gun violence in West Philadelphia.
Every time I see a Philadelphia politician get out and talk about how they want to address gun violence and how they want to deal with gun violence, um, but then in the next sentence they don't talk about, or they pivot away from infrastructure and education and the arts. And it's like you you want to deal with the effects of the causes of gun violence.